Hi, my name is Crystal Teenan. I'm the IT Accessibility Coordinator here at NC State University.
And my name is Brian Deque, and I'm a front-end designer and developer also at NC State University, although right now I'm in snowy Boston.
So we are going to go ahead and jump on in if that's okay with y'all. We're going to start things out with a quick refresher on accessibility fundamentals. And so I've got a couple links here, and so we're going to be sharing our slides and our information. Brian, do you mind just progressing to the next slide for me after we are done with this? And I just want to start out with kind of our legal landscape. So right now there's been a lot of digital accessibility complaints kind of going around. And so the first link that we have here is actually originally an article from Measley's litigation report, Cyber Tech and E-commerce, named Schools and Organizations That Serve Education Beware OCR Complaints Addressing Online Accessibility. And so the article goes into some information about how one person has been filing about 100 complaints a month around digital accessibility, and they are not necessarily affiliated with any of these schools. They've been using the WAVE automated checker by WebAIM, and so they typically hit about 10 pages on a school site, usually their home page, their disability services page, the homepage of their library, and other really important services for students pages, and then file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, an OCR complaint. So this one individual has filed around 1,800 OCR complaints in the last few years, and they're not all for universities. And Brian, I see that someone's asking for our slides. So they're not all universities, some are elementary and secondary schools, but it's a huge deal, and so I just want to kind of share that. You can also look at their Facebook, this one individual's Facebook wall of shame if you want to see. They name what schools they're doing or have put complaints against. And then the other link is from the U.S. Department of Education, and it's pending cases that are open as of, I believe, January 12th. And if you can filter that information, and right now there's about 805 accessibility cases, which is a lot. And so I bring up these two links to demonstrate the sheer volume of digital accessibility cases and to note the critical importance of not neglecting digital accessibility. So we're going to move on to our next slide. So we're on slide 3 or slide 4. And so as we're talking about digital accessibility, I'm sure many of you already know a little bit about it, but I want to talk about the standards that we're upheld to. Because it's hard to just arbitrarily say is something accessible. And so there was a refresh of the Section 508 standards just a year ago. And so the United States Access Board updated accessibility requirements for information and communication technology, ICT for short. And so by doing this, they incorporated more functional performance criteria, which I personally really like because the revised requirements are outcome-based. And so if a technical requirement does not address one or more of the features when you're evaluating it, you just need to see, does it work? Which is always beneficial because sometimes things don't fall into a certain category or it's under a different umbrella, but at the end of the day, can someone use it? Can they access it? And the updated or the refreshed 508 standards also incorporate the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, so WCAG 2.0A and AA. And so these are standards that are developed or guidelines, and they have success criteria and conformance requirements, and they apply to websites, non-web electronic documents, and software. And so we're going to move on to our next slide, slide 5, and we're going to talk about what the 4 principles of WCAG are, because as you look at them, there are 4 overarching principles. And so the first is that your information is perceivable. You have multiple ways that a user can interact with it. So you don't just need one of your senses to interact. You can't just rely on sight or on hearing or on touch, but there's multiple modalities to that. The second one is operable, so that the user can navigate and interact with the content. So, if someone needs keyboard-only access, or that the user actually has control over the timing of a page and the time limits, that there's some error recovery, and that the interface doesn't require the user to perform an action that they don't have the ability to do. The third is understandable, so that it's simple and clear language, that you're presenting information in alternative ways. So maybe you have text, and so you're going to supplement with a video or an image or audio, and then it's usable. The user must be able to understand the content and the operation of it, which I think is very often neglected personally. And the fourth is robust. So it's accessible across devices and assistive technologies. You hear often that it's quote unquote future proof. So trying to keep up with the most current code and everything, so that way as things progress, and if someone is an early adopter of a new assistive technology or device, that they're still able to access content. And so for short, we like to think of those as POUR, P-O-U-R. So if someone's asking you about the 4 principles of WCAG, just remember POUR. So now that we kind of know what our standards are, I thought this was really helpful for me when I was reading the latest WebAIM screen reader user survey. And so this is from 2017. And so they provide a list of, they asked people, and they had almost 2,000 responses, and they provided a list of what people said were their most problematic items. And so in order, and there are CAPTCHA, unexpected screen changes, ambiguous links or buttons, flash content, lack of keyboard accessibility, complex or difficult forms, missing or improper alt text, missing or improper headings, too many links or navigation items, complex data tables, inaccessible missing search, and missing skip links. And I'm sorry for those of you who are seeing this and wondering why I'm reading all of this out loud. But if we do have anyone who's on the call who can't see this list, I want to make sure that they are able to participate. So when we look at this information, also as part of that survey, they asked, how people actually navigate through pages. And it's interesting if you go and you read it, and it's not very long. I really suggest just looking over that survey data, that 2/3 of screen reader users navigate through headings on a page. So that's a pretty substantial amount of screen reader users. So just remember that as we're talking about those accessibility barriers and how we're trying to address some of those in WordPress. So those different error or barriers, some are theme or plugin coding issues, but some are introduced by our WordPress content creators. So the ambiguous links and buttons, missing or improper alt text, and missing or improper headings, those are very easy to do wrong in the visual editor. While on the other side, CAPTCHAs or complex or difficult forms or complex data tables, those are often added to pages and posts with popular items. So remember those, because we're going to come back to those in a few minutes. So we kind of have the stage set. We know some of those barriers that our audience is being faced with. And so now, Brian, I'm going to hand it off to you so you can talk with us about how we can start to address some of those.
All right, so I'm going to start by just saying that Crystal is the accessibility expert, and I am at best an enthusiast. I don't really know what I'm doing with accessibility. I'm still learning. And part of that learning for me has been using my favorite accessibility testing tool, and hopefully your favorite after this talk. It's called aXe. It's by Deque Systems. I'm not sure if anybody from Deque is watching, but I have not been paid by them to promote their product, and it's a free product anyway, so I'm not sure how anyone would benefit from that. aXe is, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how I use aXe as a developer, how it's beneficial for a developer, and then we're going to start talking about how this starts to relate to helping our content creators. So the people who created aXe at Deque, they have what they call their aXe Manifesto, and I love the word manifesto in their GitHub repository. They say that an automated accessibility testing tool, their testing rules should have a 0 false positive rate, must be lightweight and fast, must work in all modern browsers, and must themselves be tested automatically. And aXe as a tool lives up to that standard. It is a very conservative testing engine. And by that, I mean there are things that it does not detect for accessibility, things that are very important, but what it does detect, it detects very, very well. It won't give you false positives unless you really, really mess with your content to try to trick it. And it does work in a lot of different contexts. aXe is an open source product. If you follow the URL to our slides, which we'll post at the end again also, and follow this link to their GitHub repository, you can see how everything works under the hood, and it's all in JavaScript. So if you have heard of aXe before, or if you have used aXe before, you're probably most familiar with it as a Chrome extension or as a Firefox extension. As a browser extension, aXe gives you a very nice and clean interface. Here we have a screenshot of aXe being used to test one of our pages. So it's available in Chrome Developer Tools. You run the scan of the page, and then it gives you not only what the issues are that it's found, but a lot of information about those issues. It gives you a description, some helper text, an impact rating. So here the example, the impact is rated as serious, and then some text with a suggested fix for how you would go about resolving this issue. So that's as the browser extension, but aXe is also available as just a JavaScript file that you can include in any project that you're working on. And in that, as a JavaScript include, aXe will output all the same data that you saw in that browser extension in a very clean and easy to use structured way. All of the information that you would like to see about those issues. So here I have a little code example, super simple code example. axe.run initializes the axe scan, and I'm just telling it to log the results in the console. And then I have a screenshot here of the output in the console, and you see all the same information that we saw from that browser extension: the description, the help text, a link to documentation, the impact rating, and so on. So as a developer, you look at this and you think, there are a lot of ways I can use this, especially all of this helper text. So aXe has 61 different testing rules that can be turned on and off individually, and each violation comes with this sort of wealth of introductory information about, for instance, color contrast. What does that mean? How do I fix it? Why is it important? And so on. So each violation has this help and description text, a recommended fix, link to documentation, and then this impact rating. And so for me as a developer, learning about accessibility and trying to get better at accessibility, this is a really valuable tool just for my own education. But the descriptions that it offers, the text, the feedback that it provides are really good, clear, concise helper texts without very much jargon. And it really seems like non-developers would benefit from this too. There are certainly things in those 61 aXe testing rules that are totally irrelevant to most WordPress users. Most WordPress users, when they're creating content in WordPress, they're not going to be doing a whole lot with ARIA attributes or anything like that. But there are definitely things that all of our content creators could benefit from. And so that brings us to our project, bringing aXe to WordPress with the NC State Accessibility Helper. This is a plugin that I've been tinkering on for probably about a year at this point. And then we hired Crystal not too long ago, and she brought a whole lot of energy and life into it too. Now we have all sorts of grand plans that we'll be talking about later on. If you attended WPCampus 2017 in Buffalo, this plugin made a cameo appearance toward the end of my talk, but there have been changes, so stay tuned. Don't go wandering over to that other room. So let's take a look at this plugin. My goals for this plugin are to display all of this aXe data in a way where users inside of WordPress can see it and benefit from it. I want to provide this kind of accessibility feedback in context as they're creating their content, and really I want to bring accessibility testing into the content creation process. Rather than a developer like me reviewing a page and using a browser extension to decide, does this need any fixes, I'd like to try to make it so that our content creators, the people who are actually typing up what goes in each page or post, have an opportunity to review their content for accessibility without a whole lot of overhead on their part or on our part, training them how to use these external tools like a browser extension or a third-party testing website or something like that. And so I built this WordPress plugin that is painfully simple. And I say painfully because it took me a really long time to land on this formulation. The first thing that the plugin does is it adds this button to the familiar WordPress publish meta box that we all know and love. The button says Run Accessibility Check, and if you click on the button, it does the exact same thing that the preview button does up at the top of the meta box, with a couple of small changes. First, it loads the preview with two JavaScript files, the aXe core JavaScript file that is the actual aXe accessibility testing engine, and then this A11y-tests.js file that we've written that will initialize the aXe tests and do a few extras that we're going to be looking at in a little bit. And then also it loads a style sheet which controls styles and controls the display of the data that we get out of aXe. And so if we click this button, we can see what this preview looks like. We end up with an annotated preview that uses all of this aXe data to highlight detected accessibility issues. And as a very deliberate choice, we've limited the testing scope for aXe to just the part of the page that is created by the content, the WordPress function, the underscore content, so that we're showing our content creators accessibility issues that they can plausibly fix. They don't really need to know that the skip link is missing or there's a color contrast issue in the header if they can't fix it. We need to know that as developers, but I don't want to confuse our users. And so here we have a screenshot of one of these annotated previews. We have some beautiful green text, this light green color against a white background, and there's an indicator that's showing what the problem is, that elements must have sufficient color contrast. And then you click on the Learn More button, and that will open up a modal which is also generated from all the aXe data and shows you all of the other information that the aXe is providing. The link to documentation, a little more information about why we test for this kind of an issue, and then all of the recommended actions that aXe recommends and has built in. And then, so one of the things we started running into with this is pages that have lots of accessibility issues. That annotated preview became unwieldy, and so we also have an accessibility report option added to the toolbar at the top of the page. Excuse me, and that will open up an accessibility report, which is all the same information, just given in a nice list, summary of all of the issues that have been detected for that particular post or page. I mentioned earlier that we have a few extras, and this is where our extras start coming in. So aXe has its 4 levels of impact that its tests detect: critical, serious, moderate, or minor. And aXe has been designed to avoid false positives. We've created some of our own custom tests, and those custom tests are deliberately made to have false positives. These are things at an info impact rating, we're calling it, things that should be flagged to get a second look. So for instance, aXe will detect if an image doesn't have an alt attribute, and one of our additional tests will flag an image that does have alt text, but just needs a second look. We want to remind our content creators that, even if they have alt text, it's not necessarily good alt text, and before you press publish, you should take a second look and make sure it's saying what it should be saying about the image. So really the goal is to get away from this idea that accessibility is something that you do and you finish and you're done with, and try to make it more of an education and information sort of a thing, where users are reminded to be reviewing their content and be making the most of their opportunities to improve it. So earlier, Crystal highlighted some of the feedback that came from the screen reader user survey, and these 6 items in particular that happened commonly in WordPress that are introduced by our users. And all 6 of these are represented in some form in this plugin. We may not be able to detect complex or difficult forms in terms of this is a very difficult or hard to interpret, hard to use form, but we can highlight things that go wrong with forms frequently. For instance, form elements not having labels. So for each of these, ambiguous links and buttons, missing an improper alt text, missing or improper headings, CAPTCHAs, difficult forms, and complex data tables, each and every one of these has at least one rule and sometimes multiple rules that can try to help correct some of these issues and nudge content creators toward best practices, or at the very least get them start thinking about ways they could maybe reformat their content. So I see a couple of people saying they want to try this out themselves, and I'm very happy to say you can. It's not currently available in the WordPress.org plugin directory because I am scared to make that leap, but it is ready to use. If you use the GitHub Updater plugin, which is linked to in these slides, you can use that to then add this plugin from our GitHub repository, which is at go.ncsu.edu/a11y-helper-github. And for the developers in the audience who go to that repository and look at my code and realize that I don't actually know what I'm doing and they could do it all so much better than I can, now's your opportunity to help make it better. Contributions are very welcome. I would be very interested in other people's ideas for improving the plugin and hopefully making the code on the back end a little cleaner and happier too. But yeah, go ahead, Crystal.
So I'm gonna steal some time from Brian right now. And before I progress with this, I just want to brag a little bit about some of the custom work that Brian's been doing with this. And I'm very excited about some of the other things that is to come. Some of those information boxes that you saw, I was like, hey, Brian, wouldn't it be great if it could flag it if it says here or click here for the link text? And he's like, I can do that. Or, hey, it says CAPTCHAs are, a lot of times a problem for people because there's a lot of inaccessible CAPTCHAs out there. Can we flag it for that? And so, sorry, I just wanted to kind of brag about that, but then also about I'm excited for what else Brian's going to be able to help us do with it, and whomever else out there who wants to be part of this. So I'll get back to the actual topic, but so we want to remember that aXe is a helper, so it helps. It doesn't fix. So our goal is that aXe is going to be that we're utilizing it as a testing tool and as an educational tool. It's kind of a good way for us to get our foot in the door. Like Brian was saying, it doesn't test for everything, and there are certain things that you really need a human element for. Like right now, it doesn't test for reading level, but that's something that. Sorry, Brian, I don't know if I told you I'm going to ask you about that or not.
We'll see what we can do.
It doesn't test for just, usability. Is content organized well? Does it flow? Is it consistent throughout your site? So there's other things that you really need to have a human element for, but this is an amazing place to start, and it really is a nice, easy way for content creators to visually see what's going on accessibility-wise on their pages. And so now that we have this, this has just been, Brian rolled it out with our Office of Information Technology group, and so now we are trying to prepare to scale up for a campus rollout. And we've all seen good campus rollouts, and we've all seen bad campus rollouts. So we're trying to be very strategic about this. We have not started this process as of yet, but these are kind of our plans for that. So right now, people can register we're doing our Spring Web Accessibility Challenge, and so part of that is we're going to be publicizing this as people come to learn about the reports that they're getting and their accessibility. And I saw one of the questions is actually about the sort site reports, and we actually run those too, but I kind of want to connect that. This is really for more content editors and creators, where those sort site are going to give you the full report. Like Brian was saying, you're going to see like the skip links or skip navigation links and some of those other errors that a developer would need to address. So we're going to publicize it on campus. It's hard sometimes to make accessibility fun when everyone knows it's the most fun thing there is. And so we're going to make sure that people know it's an honor to be an early adopter, and that we're really excited for them to be part of this with us and present it as an opportunity for them to improve their site's content and partner with us. And so we're really going to put a lot of efforts into the mindset of being part of this. And like most of you guys, we have favorites, quote unquote. So there's certain units on campus that we're going to start with. We're not going to do a full campus rollout all at once. It's going to be systematic or strategic with that. So there's certain groups that we're going to start and kind of really go hand in hand with them. And, we might still be a little bit on the early side of that, but part of beginning with them is that we're going to provide them with guidance and training and documentation, but we're really going to ask for as much feedback from them as possible. So that way, as we then proceed to other groups, and we've gotten that from our quote unquote favorite group, we can really incorporate that back into how we're approaching people and the guidance and the training and documentation that we are providing. So a lot of this is coming from a mindset of accessibility is your friend. Yes, it's the right thing to do, but what a great honor to be part of this. It's nice, it's easy, and we're going to listen to you and try and make things better as we progress.
So with that in mind, we have our contact information here and the links to the slides and to the plugin again. But what I really want you to walk away with is I want you to steal this plugin. Either just using it directly, there might be a little NC State-y sort of language here and there, but by and large, it should work on anyone else's websites as well. Steal our plans for a campus rollout. Take this plugin and fork it and make it better or make it more specific for your purposes, and help make your campus websites more accessible. So with that, we'll be here to answer some questions. Let's see. So I lost my cursor. 1 second. Here we go. So we have a few questions already. Would you recommend this plugin if we are already using SiteImprove? I think Crystal spoke to that just a moment ago, but I mean, just from my perspective as a developer who is still somebody who's learning about accessibility and trying to get better, I think it's always good to have more opportunities to learn and to see different testing results and see different tools perspectives on what can be improved.
Brian, I'm going to follow that up too. One of the really nice things about this is that you're really getting that accessibility information as you are creating your content. You can go ahead and check on that page, as you've just updated it or added stuff to it, as opposed to SiteImprove, which, you would run your reports. And so you may not be quite as inclined to do that every time you update one page or something. So this is, to me, a very nice, easy, quick way to get some of that information, as opposed to waiting to run, a report on that page a little more formally. One of the other questions is, are there any recommendations for replacing CAPTCHA with a method that is considered accessible? So there's a couple different ways to do that. One of the ways that I personally like, and this is not my idea, I talked with some of the folks over at the National Federation for the Blind, and so they recommend, maybe like a simple math problem, and you can change it up. So that way, if you are blind or deaf or blind and deaf, that you can answer it. I honestly can never get CAPTCHAs, and I'm neither blind nor deaf. And I sometimes give up because I'm like, I still don't know what the words say, and I can't hear can't tell what the audio says. So there are ways to have accessible CAPTCHAs.
Let's see. So we have a question here. Will the plugin check meta blocks in Advanced Custom Fields Pro? So you're calling me out a little bit. I lied a little bit on one of the slides for purposes of clear explanation. It doesn't actually depend on the actual function, the_content. What I was trying to express there, using that as sort of shorthand, is it will, the plugin is designed to check, I guess, the section of the page or the post that includes the underscore content. So if you follow all the WordPress coding standards and things like that, there are some CSS classes that get added in your theme to the containing element that contains the content, or the content of your post or page. So what this plugin does is it tells aXe to run its rules against the things contained in that containing element based on those CSS classes. So the net result of that is, if you use ACF Pro or some other page builder or something that outputs content into a page or a post, it will work so long as the content is being dropped into a container like that, one of those elements. There's also a settings page where you can, for different page templates or different post types, you can specify what element you want to be checking. So if your theme is sort of a funky theme and it doesn't drop that content into that place that I'm anticipating it to be, you can change that in the settings, and I'm hoping that's going to work. I haven't tested that out a whole lot because mainly we've been testing against themes that we've built, but I'm like 85% sure you won't run into any problems. I also see a couple of people asking about Gutenberg. So the only thing that doesn't work in Gutenberg right now is adding at least I think, is adding the little run accessibility check button up at the top by the publish button, because Gutenberg has moved everything around, and I don't know if there's documentation that exists yet about how to add things to that publish section where the publish button is. Besides that, there is also a meta box that gets added that has sort of a summary of what is accessibility and why does it matter. And that meta box also contains this another copy of that button to generate the preview. And so that will continue to work in Gutenberg as far as I know, no matter what.
I see one of our other questions is, if you have limited resources, in parentheses, a small team with other responsibilities, what small measures make a big difference as far as testing outcomes, in your opinion? And so my answer to this, and I do think testing outcomes are important, and as we were talking about earlier, that's kind of where the OCR complaints come in, but they don't necessarily always match up with that functional performance criteria. So that's where I really think it's useful to go to your users and see what problems that they're having. And so looking at things like the survey, or if you do have students with disability or users with disabilities on your campus that you can talk with. We're actually hosting a focus group with our students here this spring, just to kind of hear what they're doing. But the big ones really are, your headings, your link text, your images. I think we focus a lot on users who utilize screen readers, which is great. But at the university level, you can talk with your disability services department, and you're going to have a large population of students with cognitive disabilities. So usability is vital. People probably are tired of hearing this from me, but I always say that usability and accessibility are best friends. And so just having proper structure and order, and there's a logical way to find things, and that you can test. I was joking, but it's not a joke. I'm asking Brian to work on a test for the reading level of a page. And as a university, there are some caveats to that, because some of our information is higher level, and so we will need larger words. But if we have acronyms on page, that we're going to spell out what it is and give the acronym as well. I've been at NC State since October, and I cannot even count the million acronyms that have been thrown at me, and I cannot tell you what most of them mean still. So I really think that some of those basic, easy things have the biggest impact. As far as testing goes, sometimes just cleaning up a few things on your page, like your headings, or adding alt text. Given it, as Brian was talking earlier, you want to make sure that alt text is conveying the meaning of the image. And if there is no meaning for that image, that you're setting that image's background. If it's something that you'd visually jump over with your eyes, please don't make them have to not jump over it as well. So I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry, that's probably a longer answer than you wanted. And then, excited to try out aXe. Besides aXe, is there anything else that you would recommend that is out there and you use to help aid with making sites more accessible? So we currently are a sort site campus, and so it's nice because it's easy to run large group reports, and I can send them to our different developers or content owners. But I do think, and I do think it's beneficial, looking on the compliance side, to also do a little bit of spot testing with Wave from WebAIM, and that's free. I know that I saw some advertisement that they just came out with something to do larger, actually, site tests instead of just pages. But I think that you would have to pay to use that. But since that's what a lot of the complaints are being used, and you'll notice if you use different testers that sometimes they'll yield different results, and that's because you as the human kind of have to cipher through that a little bit, and sometimes there are some judgment calls depending on how things are being used and utilized. But those would probably be, and I'm not endorsing SortSite. They just happen to meet the needs and the finances of our university, but there's a lot of great other tools out there. There's actually a page. I'll find it and I'll put it on the side comments that has a whole list of the gazillion different automated testing tools that are out there.
Including one that is by Deque Systems and is a paid service. And I feel like I should mention that just because I've gotten a lot of mileage out of their free thing. Never tried any of their paid services, but I'm sure they're great. And then let's see, the last question that we have in here that we haven't marked as answered is the plugin you developed going to be available for others to use? I'm hoping you asked that before I said that hit that slide in the presentation. It is available. The link should be on that last slide, and I think was posted in the chat as well. And I really do hope that people take a look at the code. Don't judge me too harshly, and help me out with improving the tool as we move forward.